Hello, and welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, November 14th, 2018. And welcome anyone who's watching live, anyone who's watching this archived and perhaps tuning in for the first time. And my name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore, and I do this series of weekly video chats where I just like to show off different features of the program or different things about music or really different topics relating to MuseScore. And so it's always a little bit open if people want to participate live and just type in some questions and I can answer. But I always have a very specific topic that I am planning on talking about. Feel free to ask about other things. The thing that I wanted to talk about today has to do with importing music from other programs. Now, I have talked about this before, but I want to go into a little more detail, not just how to get it there, but what to do with it once you have it there. In other words, if you've created some music or someone else has created music in Finale or Sibelius or any other program that supports MusicXML, which is what we'll be talking about mostly. How you can bring that music into MuseScore, take a look at it, and then see what might be involved in making it look like it's supposed to look. Because, different programs will display music differently. And so you can bring the music into MuseScore, but it might require some work to kind of pretty up and get it looking the way it should. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. As you can see here right now, I have up a score that I used, I created in the Café a couple weeks ago called Goblin Market. And I put it there thinking that I didn't have access to any previous version of this. In other words, that I knew I had entered it originally long ago in a program called Notator for my Atari, and I was unable to find a Finale version from the years when I used Finale. Well, in preparation for this particular Café, I discovered I did have a version of Goblin Market, which is great because I want to show what it looks like to take a pretty complicated, a short but complicated score musically, and what happens when it gets imported. So this is the version that I created in the Café last time. You may remember at the very end, I was sort of struggling. If you watched it, I was struggling at the end trying to figure out the best way to get the time signature to display the way I wanted. And what I ended up settling on after the Café was over was, I think, a pretty reasonable compromise. Under time signature properties, I went with 15/8 as my time signature, but I told it to display as 4+3/4, which is of course a lie. That's really only 14/8, but it's okay. It's displaying that way. And then I added the 1/2 as a symbol. I was able to add 1/2 from the symbols palette, and then I only had one symbol to add rather than try to laboriously create this whole thing from scratch, which I was trying to do and beating my head against a wall at that previous Café. So, but for this part, you may remember it's one long 15/4 measure that crosses the bar line. So anyhow, that's what I ended up with there. MIDI import. Yeah, I'll talk about MIDI import also. I'll do some examples of that. Very good question. Now, I will say that MIDI is nowhere near as useful as MusicXML as a form of transferring music between programs. If all you've got is MIDI, okay, we'll try to see how we can make do. But MusicXML was designed for the purpose of exchanging notation information. MIDI was designed for the purpose of playback, specifically so to allow one synthesizer to control another synthesizer live, and then later was the ability to actually create files in MIDI format. But really it's all about playback. It doesn't have any really basic information like whether this note should be F sharp or G flat. It doesn't have that kind of basic information. It doesn't have basic information about things like should this note be indicated as a eighth note or as a dotted eighth, maybe that's staccato, which is, or as a quarter note that's staccato. Things like that are not indicated in a MIDI file. It's really just some pretty raw pitch information. Or if this note, if you played it live and this note was a little bit late, how it doesn't, you might have meant for it to be an eighth note directly on the beat. Oh yes. I allow myself to get interrupted all the time. As you can see, because I'm a developer, there's this developers chat, and I think I should probably just say goodbye to people. There we go. So oh, I just said goodbye to the developers chat, and yet I'm still getting notifications. Oh well, such is life. There's probably a way to turn that off too, but I'm not going to worry about that. Anyhow, let me show you first some basic things about import. I'm not going to use this example right now, but I did want to follow up about that thing. I'll show this at the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this score. Oh, here's Goblin Market there. So I guess I am showing it to you. I actually, in Finale, as you can see, I guess I am talking about this, had chosen to say that this line would be 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 3 over 4, rather than just calling it 15 over 4. Well, I could do that also in MuseScore easily if I wanted, but I was looking to see how I solved the problem of the quarter note triplet that goes over the bar line, and the answer is it looks like I didn't. It looks like somehow I lied. I don't actually remember how I did this because I created this so many years ago. But somehow, even though this measure here only has 3.5 beats, I somehow managed to place 4 beats worth of music into this line. This G really crosses over the line. This B really doesn't start at the beginning of the measure, but it starts somewhere around here. And I guess Finale, that was the best I could do in Finale. I wasn't able to show it crossing this bar line any better, but I did put in a dotted bar line there to indicate that yes, this is really one measure, but it's sort of subdivided in that way. And I could certainly do that in MuseScore as well. So in order to import this into MuseScore, I'll just go ahead and do it. What I would do first is in Finale, this is, by the way, the free version of Finale, Finale Notepad. I used to have the regular version of Finale when I was a regular Finale user, but I stopped updating it years ago, and I haven't installed it on any computer I've owned for the last several years. So it's what I do have is Notepad installed. I could install the full version of Finale if I wanted. I do have a license, but I'm not interested. Finale Notepad does what I need, which is open anything I've ever created in Finale and export it to MusicXML. It's fantastic. So with just the free Finale Notepad, I can load my Goblin Market score, go to MusicXML, export. And when I export it, it'll let me export to XML format. And you can see I've actually already done that, goblinmarket.xml. So I can load that into here. So Goblin Market. Oh, I didn't put it in this. Sorry, I put it in here. So Goblin Market. No. Where's the XML file? Ah, here it is. Okay. So when I import the MusicXML file, so one thing you can see is that in Finale, this was 3.5 over 4. When I imported it into MuseScore, the point, as we discovered, doesn't exist, so I just see 35 over 4. So I would have to adjust how this time signature looks. But you can see these dotted bar lines that I put in came through actually quite nicely, as did whatever the heck I did to make these triplets work out. I actually have no idea what I did to make these triplets work out. Oh, look at what I did. This measure, I can see now, has invisible rests in it. This is not a 3.5 over 4 measure. This is really a 4/4 measure with the final rest hidden. That's how I cheated it. So it won't play back correctly. And that must have been my how I made it work in Finale, was to just put in the extra half a beat rest and hide it. Or maybe I did something that MusicXML converted that way. MusicXML doesn't understand every feature of every program. It's sort of a least common denominator. So when you enter something into any notation program and export to MusicXML, you can expect to lose some information along the way. And then again, when you import it into some other program, it's probably not going to get everything that was in that MusicXML file, and the MusicXML file doesn't really contain everything that was in the original, but it gets most of it. As you can see, this is an awful lot of details that it's gotten right, and that includes things like the spellings of the spellings of the accidentals, which, by the way, I think I probably spelt differently in my finale version. Like, I think this B flat here, I don't remember if I spelt it as B flat in my version. Yeah, looks like I did. Boy, is this a wrong note here? So it looks like in my finale version, I thought that was a B flat. Bum, bum, boo, Is that true? I don't know if that's true or not. I'll have to listen to the recording again. But this note says it's a B flat, but the version I entered it as a G sharp, which is not just a different spelling, it's a totally different note. So anyhow, the MusicXML import came back correctly. Here's the MusicXML import. It came back with the B flat. So this particular score came back almost exactly the way I entered it. Including the dotted bar lines and almost the spellings of the time signature. It's just that that dot, that 3.5, wasn't supported, so I didn't get to enter that. I mean, I'm going to have to fix that the same way. So do you load from load or import? It's just under open. So to open any file in MuseScore, it's file open, and that will, any file that we can open, you'll get that way. There is no import. Well, there's import PDF under the file menu because we don't really import PDFs. It really goes through a web service. But all the formats that we do load, including MIDI files as well as MusicXML files, are just all listed together under file open. So anyhow, that's the basic process. You export from Finale, you import into MuseScore. And since this particular score really had only notes, it really didn't have any fancy markings. Pretty much everything came through perfectly except the spelling of the time signature, which I would fix the same way. I kind of have a notion now that, gee, I liked how those dotted bar lines work, so I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to go here and make these dotted bar lines. Look at that. Nice. I had already made this one invisible, right? Yeah. So yeah, I kind of like how that looks, and I think I'll do the same here to sort of indicate that it's because this is 4 plus 3.5. This is the 4 side, that's the 3.5 side, and then there's a full bar line there. So yeah, it was a nice thing I had done earlier that I kind of forgot about here. Anyhow, so as far as MusicXML goes, this one did its job. But it's not always that simple. So I'm going to go back to Finale, and I'm going to look at one of the other files that I have loaded here. And so the one that I'm going to look at right now, I want to talk briefly about this music. Fred Hess was a composer, saxophonist who lives, I live in Denver, and yeah, that's very interesting that I continue to get chat notifications. Anyhow, there's a mode. I can turn them off, right? Somehow. Oh, well, you get to see the life of the developer. Did this just stop? Am I still live? Oh, am I still live? Nuts. My phone looks like it stopped. But this says it's still streaming, so I'm going to assume y'all can still hear me. Can y'all hear me? If anyone's watching and able to get to a keyboard, can you just let me know that, yeah, okay, that looks good. So, normal XML file. So, XML is a generic file format. There's lots of different kinds of XML files in the world. MusicXML is a specific type of XML file that all notation programs, well, almost all music notation programs support. So that is what we support. So we can export to MusicXML, import MusicXML, other kinds of XML files that might be used for completely random purposes that have nothing to do with music. MuseScore won't have any idea what to do with them because it's not really music that's in them. Boy, that's going to be annoying. Oh well. So it's the developers chat is sometimes active and sometimes not, and right now it's choosing to be active. So, oh well. So anyhow, Fred Hess was the saxophonist and composer who just died last weekend. He was like a personal mentor to me. I worked with him for many years, played in various ensembles of his, in a big band that he led, and we recorded a few CDs, and we did a duo recording. He normally wrote music for like a quartet. That was his favorite kind of setting. And again, let me make sure, I think I'm still live. So let me I just want to make sure. Sorry, I am not seeing in, I'm trying to like monitor on my phone, and my phone makes it look like it's no longer live, and so I'm a little not sure. But I'm just going to go on as if everything is okay, because I don't know what else to do. So anyhow, Fred is someone that I really respected as a musician and composer, and I'm really going to miss him a lot. And I decided to take some of his music to use as an example here. He had originally written a lot of music for a quartet with himself on saxophone, plus trumpet, plus bass and drums. It's a jazz quartet, but his music is, calling it jazz is kind of a it's in the jazz tradition, but it's also very much more composed than typical jazz, and composed according to like 20th century classical techniques, 12-tone techniques and things, serial techniques, if people are familiar with that language, Arnold Schoenberg, etc. So he uses those kinds of compositional techniques in his music, writes very contrapuntally with a lot of imitative counterpoint and things like that, and a lot of dissonance. But also room for improvisation in his music. Yes, good. Okay, thank you for the confirmation. So this is a piece that he did in Finale. Now, Fred is also kind of interesting to me in that he worked with Finale, then switched to Sibelius because he got frustrated with some aspects of Finale, then went back to Finale. Either that or the other way around. I wish I could remember what the order was, but anyhow, he's one of the people I know that actually used both programs fairly extensively. So he wrote a lot of music originally for that quartet format, and then he decided he wanted to be able to like do concerts and do tours just as a duo, and decided that saxophone and piano would be a good combination for that. And I had worked with him some occasionally in larger ensembles, and so he took a lot of his music and kind of reorchestrated it for just piano and saxophone. So he wrote it so that like the piano right hand would be what was the trumpet part, and the piano left hand is what was the bass part. And then he also filled it in some, you can see, added some chords here and there. So this music often was, again, music he had written for quartet, but then he also wrote music just for the piano saxophone duo also. And this music, I have his Finale files for a few of them. Mostly he just, gave me PDFs to print. But for whatever reason, I have a few Finale files, and so I'm going to take this piece of his, which you can see has dynamics and other text and things, and see what happens if I export that. So I'm going to go to MusicXML, export, and I'm going to put this in as going there, because that's the name of this piece. And by the way, I think also I want to play some of this music. Let's listen to the Finale playback first. All right, so I think that gives you the basic idea of, oh, and there's that part there too. Okay, so this was very difficult music to learn, I have to tell you that. So if I now go over to MuseScore and go to File, Open, I just did Control O. Sorry, once again, I forgot to turn on my keystroke thing, but we're not going to be doing so much stuff that's going to matter, I don't think. What was this called again? Going There. When I import Going There, I'm expecting I'm going to get all the music, I'm going to get the text, but maybe it looks exactly right and maybe it doesn't. So one of the things I see is that for whatever reason, oh, look at that. Somehow, even though that music was showing up as being for just piano and how did that happen? He must have invisible staves in here or something, or he has relabeled these staves. So he must have, wow, I don't even know how he did that, but this must be when I said he converted some music over in that way. He must have originally created it for the quartet and then sort of modified it to look like it was music just for piano and saxophone, but the MusicXML export apparently went through and included it all, including the tenor part and the bass part and the drum part, even though he must have used like hide empty staves, or no, he must have just marked them invisible. So I can see the first thing that I'm going to want to do is remark those staves invisible. So I'm going to go to Edit, Instruments, shortcut is I, by the way, and I'm just going to mark the tenor, bass, and drum parts invisible again, because that is one bit of information that didn't come through via MusicXML. All right, so now I see something that's closer to what I started with. But there's a number of things that are still like not very good looking. One of them is, for whatever reason, I'm not able to, it's not able to fit more. Like here, there's a line break there, but that shouldn't have needed to start a whole new page. It looks like there's whole new pages. There's probably something in the settings here of what the distance between systems is that's causing it to only try to fit one system per page, and I really don't know what that is. So I'll tell you one of the things that I often do. When something comes in through MusicXML, probably it's still accounting for those invisible staves. I'm just going to create a brand new score and copy and paste all this stuff in. This isn't strictly necessary, but it often will solve a lot of these problems of like the fact that when stuff comes in from another format, a lot of things might not be at their default settings because it's trying to pick up settings from the MusicXML file but failing. Like you can see all these overlapping tempo markings and this dynamic marking that is nowhere near where I expect it to be. If I select that and let me open the inspector with F8, it looks like it has a vertical offset applied that must have come in from the MusicXML file. Now I should mention, if you go to Edit, Preferences, Import, there's a setting here to say whether or not it's going to try to import any of that extra information about where the breaks are and layout. And I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to re-import this without that and see what difference that makes. So I'm going to close this one and go back here and re-import it. So if I import it again, takes a little bit. And actually, because I don't even want to hear these guys in playback, I think I'm just going to delete those staves entirely. So I'm just going to select that and remove, remove, remove. Okay, so things are a little better now. At least, you know, things are flowing like I expect them to flow. But I still have these like repeated rehearsal marks and things, because probably in the original, those that he had entered that information on every staff. I'm trying to use MuseScore shortcuts and they don't work in Finale, and I so forget how to use Finale these days. I can't remember how to do anything in Finale anymore. That's kind of a drag. So how do you scrolling is working via the scroll wheel. And then, oh, that's right, page controls down there. I remember this now. So see how he had entered rehearsal letters on every instrument. And so MuseScore doesn't do that normally. It puts rehearsal mark at the top of the score only. And then it'll put it on all parts. In Finale, I guess he had it set up to display it on both staves, which isn't necessarily good or bad. It's not standard, but it is what it is. In the score, normally I expect to see it only on the top staff, but it's showing up on both staves now because it's there. It's showing up. I'm getting 2 copies of it. So that's one of the errors that I think I'm going to need to correct. And I can see also that even though I said not to import layout, it is bringing in some of the offsets on these things. So one thing I'm going to do right away is I'm going to do Control-A to select everything, and then hit Control-R to reset positions. So this has now, in theory, reset the positions of everything. But I can see that even though this has a horizontal and vertical offset of 0, it's displaying in some very strange place. Whereas this one is not. And I think it's because the style settings must be set in some odd way based on the MusicXML import. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new score and call it Going There New, so I remember which one's which. And I'm going to say that I want it to be for tenor saxophone and piano. Then the next thing I want to do is, if you look at Fred's original, he notated it in the key of B flat. Why? Because Finale at that time, as far as he knew, I don't know if this is true or not, but it didn't appear to have this concept of an atonal key signature. In other words, a key signature that doesn't transpose. He wanted to be able to read his part with no key signature. So he basically put the part in the score in B flat, so he wouldn't get a key signature. It meant I was stuck with a B flat key signature, even though the key piece is not in B flat at all. I would rather just use the atonal key signature. So when I create my version, I'm going to select the atonal key signature. So neither of us will have a key signature. Even though the tenor part is going to be transposed. The piece is in 4/4. It may or may not stay in 4/4 the whole way through, and that's going to be one flaw with this copy and paste method, but I'm just going to roll with it. So what I'm going to do now is go back to his version, select all, copy. I don't know how many measures this is. Oh, it even tells me, MuseScore tells you it's 34 measures. So I almost have enough measures here. I think the default was 32, so let me add a couple, and then I pressed Control B a couple times, and then paste. So now that I've pasted, I now have something that so look at this, the formatting is still funny. Why is that? What staff is this attached to? Staff 1. I'm actually at a loss to understand why that dynamic is where it is. So you get to see me figure some things out on the fly. If I go to Style, General, hairpins are at 7.5. If I go to Style, Text, Dynamics, wow, look at that. They're like nowhere. That makes no sense. Dynamics wouldn't normally be that way. Oh, that's somehow I didn't click Dynamics. There's Dynamics. So it's 8 spaces. I actually don't know what's going on here. Text properties. Oh, their text properties are all off. Look at that. Okay, so it has still. All right, so we're learning here. What's happened is there's different places. There's the offset that can be applied here, but there's also formatting that can be applied within text properties, and I'm going to have to reset all those. So what I'm going to do is right-click one dynamic and then say select all similar elements and then reset text to style. Much better. So these are the kinds of things that you may have to do when you're importing things from MusicXML. The problem is Fred had probably originally adjusted the position of that dynamic manually relative to whatever the default was in Finale. But of course, the default position in MuseScore is totally different. So his adjustment made no sense in MuseScore. And so that's how we ended up with MuseScore trying to honor some of that information, but doing bad things with it. So the same is going to have to be true. And so actually now I can go back to his original version probably and do the same thing. I can select all similar elements, Control R, and then, reset text to style. So that has fixed that, and now I can do the same with these rehearsal marks. Now I have, wow, look at that. That rehearsal mark is attached to some other random staff that I haven't deleted yet. So yeah, I don't like these multiple rehearsal marks. I think I would rather add those rehearsal marks myself, but this is a choice now I have to make. Am I going to be happier, like remove that? There's the good one, right? You could see it was attached to the top staff. I'm going to remember that and then delete these other guys. And now this one I can reset. In fact, while I'm at it, I think I'm going to do the same trick here of all similar elements, reset to style. All right, here we go. So, and I would have to do the same for these tempo markings. Some of these tempo markings are attached to other staves. They don't really need to be there. That's attached to one of those staves that's now invisible. This is the right one, I guess. And if I hit reset and then also select all similar ones and reset to style. So as you can see, all the information came over, but it doesn't look the way it originally did. And so if I want to fix all these things, it's going to be some amount of work like that, deleting those duplicates, looking at things that need different manual adjustment. Like here's a couple measures after B. There was a hairpin that he had entered. That must be this one here. And he had probably entered it and then dragged it somewhere so that it looks like it's only in the second half of the measure here, but when it exported to MusicXML, he probably had entered it at the beginning of the measure and then dragged it over, and that's the way it came over in MuseScore, but without that manual adjustment. So really, this needs to be re-entered correctly. I want it to extend. I'm using Shift Right to extend it to there, and then I'll hit Shift Tab to go to this handle, and now Shift Right again to move it over, etc. So is that the right place? I feel like I'm not looking at the same one. That was why am I not seeing? Yeah, that's the same place. All right. I was looking at the wrong part. That's this one here. Oh, yeah. So anyhow, letter B. What is going on? Did I hide the wrong part? B flat trumpet. Look at that. I hid the wrong part. I'm looking at the wrong things. That's why I'm getting so confused here. This is the version where I deleted those staves. So now I wish I hadn't. Because now I deleted the saxophone staff. So let me go over here back to this version. And so did you see what happened there? I accidentally deleted the tenor staff, and I meant to delete the trumpet staff. So I messed up, and because I messed up, now I would have to like undo a lot of these changes I did to get back to where I had those. I don't like working with that directly imported MusicXML file for that reason. What I usually like to do is import the MusicXML, leave it kind of in raw format, but then copy the information over here into a clean file and then fix what I need to fix here. If there's a lot of time signature changes, that can be a drag because you're going to have to set up all those time signature changes before you do the copy and paste. But often it's a better idea. So so when I use, so this, I assume that's like the Mac version of Control R. I'm sorry, I haven't been checking my comments often enough. Anyhow, that's kind of the process here. If I then wanted to like go in, I would add those rehearsal letters. So he had a rehearsal letter at the beginning. So let me go and add that. And chances are I'm going to add some of that information. That's Control M, and I add my rehearsal letter A. The rehearsal letter B came at the end of those triplets in the piano left hand. So right here is rehearsal letter B, and I also want a double bar there. So, I'm going to re-add some of that formatting. It's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, whether you want to spend your time correcting things here or copying into a clean score and adding the things that just didn't make it over, as well as doing some correction. It's really going to be a bit of a personal decision how you want to handle that. So it also appears that when I did the copy and paste, I copied and pasted the trumpet part instead of the saxophone part because I wasn't paying enough attention. So realistically, I do need to go back here and just undo all my changes. And this time, copy from here. I'm going to press Shift, Control, End. And now I will copy. I'll go Shift, Control, End. Delete what's there, and then I like to delete what's there to make sure I don't accidentally end up with multiple copies of slurs or anything like that. There we go. And now again, I'm going to have to select similar elements, reset to style, as well as Control R. All right. So yeah, now I have something that resembles what I'm supposed to have here. I should check on the transposition, make sure everything's fine. So his transpose version started with C sharp, B flat, D. Mine starts with C sharp, E flat, D also, and I am transposed. If I go to concert pitch, his pitches go down, and we stay with no key signature, which is what I'm looking for. And if I play in here, it should sound roughly like it did on his. I want to hear the 16th note part when it shows up. Sorry, my computer's hiccuping. So anyhow, it as you see, things are basically there. Now I'm just going to have to kind of look over and add, fix up some of those dynamics and hairpins and other markings that, maybe didn't come over the way I wanted to. But, that saved me an awful lot of work if I want this music there. I don't have to re-enter all of the notes. All the notes are there for me. All I have to do is either correct the formatting of, some of these texts or copy and paste and re-enter some of the text. Basically the rehearsal marks and the tempo marks are the ones that don't come over with a copy and paste because they're the system, they're the ones attached to the system, the whole system as opposed to each staff. And that was kind of the source of the problem here, that I was getting multiple copies. If the original didn't have multiple, he had multiple tempo markings, one on each staff. If he hadn't done that, then it would have come over just fine. But, that's what happened. So I think this shows you that there's two kind of valid approaches, and depending on your particular score, either working with the imported score directly or copying it into a clean one and then fixing things up. Depending on what's there, different approach might be useful. I think, but that's the basic process that's always going to apply. Like I said, if the time signature changes anywhere in the score, which I should check and see if it does in this one. If the time signature changes anywhere in the score, that copy and paste method is going to be a little bit of a pain because the time signatures don't come across with the copy and paste. So you'll have to manually set up those time signature changes basically before you do the copy and paste. Because if you try to do it after, you'll have already had some notes that were split across the bar line, and then when you change the time signature, that's not going to get fixed. I guess you could try to use the command in MuseScore, regroup rhythms, and see if that fixed things well enough for you, but I would rather just get the time signatures right first before copying. So if your music has time signature changes and you want to do a big copy and paste operation into a clean score, get the time signature changes in first. So anyhow, that's what the process looks like. I do want to, just because it's meaningful to me, Fred having just passed away a week ago, I want to play a little bit of our recording of this so you can hear the real thing. Whoops, let me start it over. There you have it. That's Fred Hess's going there. We then go into some free improvisation. And then I think we probably play the melody out at the end, the melody, as it were. That's some of what's involved in bringing in music from other programs, and this gives you also a little taste into why that might be something you want to do. I mean, this music's kind of meaningful to me. If I ever wanted to rearrange this music for another ensemble, now I have it in MuseScore, and I can do whatever I want with it. I only have those couple of finale files from Fred, but I could probably get a hold of others if I needed to. And then if you have your own music that you've created in other programs, Finale can export to MusicXML, so can Sabatella, so can pretty much any notation program, really. So the question was about MIDI. I guess, let's see if Finale can export to MIDI. I think maybe this version doesn't export to MIDI. Oh, it does. Look at that. So let's do this. I'm gonna save as MIDI. Let's go to that same folder. It was in my documents. Score 2, scores, and then MuseScore. Going there, MIDI. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and load this in, and you'll get to see how limited MIDI is in comparison. So when I import from MIDI, the first thing you're going to see is it had no concept of what to do with key signatures. It just decided that the piece was in C because the top staff of his had no key signature, and it decided that was C, but it decided that was worth transposing for alto saxophone and then making everything be in A. I don't know what that's about. So that's what MIDI did. But also now check the spellings of these notes. It's spelling D sharp instead of what it should have been, the E flat. I need to go back to the beginning. Should have been E flat, and then C sharp, D flat, C sharp, E flat, D. Came across C sharp, E D sharp D. It didn't come across with the right spellings. And then there is no markings whatsoever. There's a tempo marking, but there's none of the rehearsal marks. There's none of the dynamics. Look what a mess it did here. There was some place where there were multiple voices involved, some clef changes, and so forth. That must have been in the original. That actually I don't really see clef changes, but MIDI is just, it didn't know which notes were in which hands, and so it makes its best guess. It meaning MuseScore. That's measure 9. Measure 9. So it there's a D sharp. Oh, that's the E flat. Yeah, the E flat carried across. This note here, for whatever reason, thought it made sense to put in the top staff, which involved having to use multiple voices, and that note could have gone into this staff and then this note up there, but that information isn't in the MIDI file. It just came across as one conglomeration of notes that MuseScore had to try to decide how to split up, and sometimes it does a decent job of that, but this is AI we're talking about. The MIDI file doesn't have that information. This is MuseScore trying to sort out whether this E here is better included in the bottom staff or the top staff. That information just isn't there. So where that happens, you know, I'm not even sure where that, well, what measure is that? That's the measure 14, 13, 12, measure 12. So measure 12, there's, it put the E in the right hand, which makes, you know, logical sense, but it's not the way it's supposed to be notated. So anyhow, this whole thing is kind of a mess, and taking this and getting it to actually look good would be much, much, much harder, because now you've got all these spelling of note issues, spelling of rhythms, which notes are in which staff, which notes, at least for piano, which notes are in which voice, if you're having multiple voices. Yeah, there's some use of multiple voices, I believe, in this piece, although I can't be sure of that. But if there's multiple voices, MIDI is not going to be able to handle that at all. Yeah, I don't know if this piece actually uses multiple voices or not anywhere in the piano part. But that's the sort of information that just doesn't come over well. So when you're using MIDI import, yeah, you'll get the notes over, and if it's a simple enough piece, maybe you'll find it useful. But boy, if you can get MusicXML, you're so much better off. Anyhow, that is what I wanted to show you about bringing in music from also, if you do bring in from MIDI, there are all these settings here that can control things like how many voices MuseScore tries to use, and whether it should try to notate clef changes or not. Like if I turn off the clef changes, I'll probably get, and then hit apply, this stuff will clean itself up. It'll, no, I don't want to save anything I did. So now the piano part doesn't show clef changes, but it still doesn't know which note is in which staff, so this didn't really help. But you know, you can keep checking some of these other options and see if any of them produce any better results for you. Maybe you get lucky. But boy, MusicXML is so much better for that. It's not perfect, but it's a really much better starting place. So yeah, if you have music in Finale or Sibelius or any other program, you want to bring it into MuseScore. In Finale, it's, even if you don't have Finale anymore, you can just install that Finale notepad, the free version, and it will export MusicXML for you. For Sibelius, you'd still need the demo version of Sibelius won't export MusicXML, so you'll have to access the real version of Sibelius. Maybe you have a friend who still has it if you don't, or maybe a school computer has it. Anyhow, if you can get it in a MusicXML format, you can get it in the MuseScore and start working with it, and start, you know, reliving some of this music, some of this, you know, maybe music that you created or that friends of yours created years ago, or even recently that maybe they want to share with you. So I'm using this as an opportunity to sort of relive some of this music that I did with Fred Hess, and that concludes this this particular episode of the MuseScore Cafe. Next week is Thanksgiving week here in the United States. I will probably be taking the week off. So I will see you in a couple of weeks for the next edition of the MuseScore Cafe. And I hope you enjoy making music meanwhile. So thanks, and see you later.